Hello everyone, welcome back to another Q&A session with Dr. Lee. First question. We learned that Roosevelt and Churchill decided to have Stalin join the war in Asia as allies. You mentioned that Roosevelt had concerns about the casualties of US soldiers in Europe with the Europe First policy. Based on this, does it mean that Roosevelt thought having Stalin on the same side could resolve the tension in Europe, or did he think that would lessen the casualties of US soldiers?
Oh, that's a very good question, but a little misunderstanding. When I said Europe first policy, it means that there are more casualties in Asia, the Pacific War. It is because after the war began in the Pacific, because of the Pearl Harbor attack by Japan in December 1941, many naval forces, collapsed in the U.S., but still, especially because of Winston Churchill's diplomatic skills, Churchill persuaded Roosevelt all the initial armaments should go to the Europe first. That's what they termed the Europe first policy between a lot of historical anecdotes between Churchill and Roosevelt about how Roosevelt was persuaded by Churchill. Anyway, so that during the beginning of the Pacific War, Japanese forces really, got strengthened, and the Japanese forces really moved too quickly, especially Japan wanted to get the much needed oil and natural resources from Southeast Asia. So Japan attacked Philippines in late 1941, where General MacArthur was stationed there, but U.S. defeated by Japan, and so MacArthur should, fled to Australia, and he had to come back later. So that's why when I say Europe first policy, there are lots of more casualties in Asia because most of the armaments, naval and air forces went to Europe first. So what was the latter part of the question?
Yeah. So does it mean that Roosevelt thought having Stalin on the same side could solve the tension in Europe, or did he think that it would lessen the casualty of US soldiers?
Well, actually, Roosevelt later wanted Soviet to join in the war in the Pacific, but Churchill, his concern is mostly in Europe. So Churchill has a double-minded on Stalin. Churchill was very much suspicious of Stalin, but Stalin is much needed person, sort of a hero to Churchill because later Stalin's uh, Soviet forces defeated Germany. So at that time, it was in the beginning of the war in 1941. The situation is quite complicated, but when I said Europe first, the U.S. forces in Asia has been defeating. That's unfortunate.
The second question is, at that time, China still had a Christian national leader, Chiang Kai-shek. Why did the US and England choose the Soviet Union, which was the only communist nation at the time, over China? And how did that decision affect the division in the Korean Peninsula after World War II?
Yes, good question again. The position of Chiang Kai-shek is rather, you know, dubious because there was a war, civil war in China between Communist Chinese Party and Chiang Kai-shek's Kuomintang Party. And then, so Chiang Kai-shek was sort of considered a junior partner in World War II because he was not really effective, even in defeating Japanese forces in China. So, so that probably one reason. The others later, many analysts saying that Chiang Kai-shek's forces and its party was very much corrupted, and their forces, nationalist forces, not popular in China in gaining popular support in between this civil war with the communist China. So Chiang Kai-shek's position is not strong during the World War II. On the other hand, Stalin's positions got strengthened a lot, especially when Nazi Germany attacked Soviet Union in June 1941. Initially, the attack by the Nazis were really successful. So the Soviet retreated, and but near Moscow was about to be conquered, but it became December, as you may know, the harsh winter weather, and the several strategic, mistakes done by Nazi Germany, and the strong resistance by the Soviet Stalin. And there are several wars, including Stalingrad War, and then many historians said that that was a turning point. December 1941, the Nazi Germany got sort of retreated from Soviet Union, and Stalin's position got stronger and stronger in the next 3 or 4 years of World War II. So that's obvious that the Stalin's position in World War II matters got a strength, so that Roosevelt and Churchill, must have Stalin in negotiation of a war, after World War II. How we're going to be, what's going to be on the table of their, kind of spoils of war, and even French leader Charles de Gaulle was not invited, and and many say he got so mad at that. So Chiang Kai-shek's all in all position is very weak. And so in that regard, the Stalin's positions got so strong in Europe, and naturally the war in Pacific was so hardened because of Japanese forces, really strong, stronger than previously thought. So that's why Roosevelt and Churchill sort of agreed that Stalin should join the war in Asia until, as I said in the lecture in the February 1945 at Yalta. But the later conference in Potsdam, Germany, the Truman's position, became a little changed, more anti-Soviet Union position. So that's kind of, I can say that Stalin's strengthened position is somehow automatically lead to its role in defeating Japan.
You explained that after World War II, in June 1949, the US forces were completely withdrawn from South Korea, but the Soviet Union stayed in North Korea. And that same year in October, China became a communist nation, and in 1950, North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union and China, started to invade the South, and the Korean War started. This leads us to question number 3. In current times, some people say that US soldiers should leave South Korea entirely to have the reunification of Korea. From the history that you explained, do you think the withdrawal of US soldiers is a good idea? Or can it cause a dangerous situation like back then?
Yeah, that's another, sort of propagandistic agenda of withdrawal of US forces from South Korea. Sort of revisionist and a leftist idea, but that is not the point of a reunification and station of U.S. forces in Korea. The current U.S. forces in Korea has three different roles based on U.S. and ROK Mutual Defense Treaty. The American forces stayed in Korea. That's one thing. Another thing is Korean War did not end formally, so that according to the armistice, UN command, the commander of UN command is a US general. And another one is, in between South Korea and the US, there is a ROK US combined forces. So that US general has three different roles with the same hat. So that US forces role is, not just protecting at this time the South Korea from North Korean attack. It is this role is became more strategic, Northeast Asian strategic role now because of uh, rising power, military power of China. So the role of U.S. bases in Japan and South Korea is more likely Northeast Asia strategic forces. So that is even understood by North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, which was revealed by Mike Pompeo's memoir that was published last year, that Mike Pompeo met with Kim Jong-un several times. And Kim Jong-un clearly said that the US forces in South Korea is a very much plus for the North Korean. I think it is not a propagandistic remarks by Kim Jong-un to attain some political goals. If you understand the cultural and historical context between North Korea and China, so North Korea consider themselves as a descendants of Gojoseon and Goguryeo, when their territory is a entire Manchuria and strong dynasty in Goguryeo. So there are historical rivalries and animosities between Goguryeo and China for millennia. So a lot of fighting, and in many cases, China was defeated by Goguryeo dynasty. So that there are not many U.S. policy analysts knew that kind of cultural historical context, why North Korea considered China as an enemy of thousands of years, while in North Korean context, Japan was considered as an enemy of hundreds of years. So in that context, so U.S. forces in South Korea is not a hurdle or block in the reunification of the two Koreas. So it should be well managed. It should be discussed in the context of a so-called new Cold War structure of China as a new superpower, and Russia and North Korea, and the US, Japan, and South Korea relations in Northeast Asia. So I don't think it's a good idea. And to tell US forces should be withdrawn, then the two Koreas will be reunified is very short-sighted view, and it's not even effective in the reunification process.
Question number 4. What role should international organizations such as the United Nations play in facilitating the reunification process?
Yes, very good question. And the United Nations, we've been mentioned in my lectures, play their crucial role in defending South Korea, the only legally recognized state in the Korean Peninsula. There was the first war done by UN resolution. I don't know, after that, there's another UN resolution, was proclaimed and started war. And so that is the only one. So United Nations election, the commission on election was unprecedented. So the election in South Korea is the only election supervised by international law. So the commission was composed of only, I guess, 8 UN member states at the time, including Canada, Australia, Philippines, and Syria and India and some countries. So it is international effort to hold a free and legitimate election. So I'm trying to emphasize the role of United Nations to the greater extent in the reunification process. But in reality, United Nations does not have any enforcement measures when anybody, breaks the rule of international law, especially, Russia invaded Ukraine. There are many UN member states condemn that attack, but we don't know what can we do. We cannot stop it because of the international rule somehow governed by actual military power, not a moral standard and moral power. But still, as many UN member states becomes more democratic member states, and becoming more democratic and moral and conscious, just like one nation becoming more democratic, United Nations could become more democratic and then influence even the 5 permanent Security Council members, the US, Russia, China, England, and France, happen to have all nuclear states. And they have a sort of veto power so that any UN resolution cannot be made without their, support. So, so even though we have such a hurdles in the United Nations scheme, I guess, as I told you, the UN member state should voice and loudly about how the peace can be achieved in the world situation. So many member states condemn Russia in the Ukraine war. That's very effective because people in Russia listen to that. And as people in Russia listen to that, they become more conscious. Even though there are many others who do not listen to such a peaceful uh, voice, but still, United Nations can be very effective in that regard, and also especially in related to the two Koreas. There are 158 or so UN member states that have diplomatic ties with both North and South Korea. There are huge numbers, huge numbers. So out of 190 something total UN member states. So 158 member states who have a kind of dual diplomatic ties with both North Korea, they could help the reunification process in whatever way. So we need to strengthen their position in at the UN arena so that the unification of two Koreas is much needed. So China and Russia, in one way or another, should be listening to that voice of peaceful unification. So there are much more I can say about that. So that probably what UN could do now and in the near future.
The last question we have for you is, what strategies can be implemented to ensure a smooth transition of power and governance structure during reunification?
Yeah, that's a good question, but not an easy one. And so means that kind of smooth transition of power and governance, probably in both North and South Korea in the unification process. So I think the South Korea will be much more stable in any scenario of unification. But in North Korea, we could think about two different scenarios. One is more abrupt and sudden change, even collapse of North Korean regime. There is always a possibility. Another scenario is more gradual reforming in North Korean power structure. I don't think that is impossible. Some people saying that Kim Jong-un regime is cannot be changed in one way or another. Uh, but I'm very hopeful. I'm sort of hopeful that Kim Jong-un regime could be reformed in one way or another as a nuclear state now. So it was amazing that nobody refuted that idea is that North Korea is a nuclear state. You know that when I talked about North Korea in 2023 and prior to 2024, this year, people really refuted the idea of North Korea as a nuclear state. But somehow, in a scholarly, discussion, even many policymakers saying that North Korea is, is a nuclear state. So that even China, especially Putin, Russia's Putin, sort of acknowledged North Korea as a nuclear state. That means that North Korea, in a way, has no threat from outside. If North Korea's real concern is attack from US or attack from South Korea, although it's not really what the US and South Korea has been trying to do, but North Korea kept saying that US and South Korea has been trying to attack. And, a lot of military operation and exercise is designed to attack North Korea. So even we agree to that idea, so now North Korea is considered a nuclear state. The idea of preemptive attack on North Korea is not really considered. Actually, it was considered a preemptive strike against North Korea in 1994. That was really, imminent attack that was avoided. And then there are several times actually, U.S. really considered preemptive strikes, even though the catastrophic aftermath is considered. But right now, uh, North Korea is considered having 40, at least 50 or more nuclear weapons readily, available to shoot many cities in South Korea and Japan and US bases in Pacific. So I think the North Koreans feel secured in that regard. Right now, North Korean feels more insecure from inside, from internal North Korean citizens, North Korean people's mind, especially young people. That symptom is shown in many respects. So that shows that Kim Jong-un's change in unification policy, the stock 180-degree change in the unification policy by North Korea. No unification because Kim Jong-un is somewhat afraid of South Korean cultural kind of influence to his own people. So the fear is coming more from within. That's my analysis. in the Kim Jong-un's current mind. And the policy of 2010, that is domestic economic redevelopment policies, and in the next 10 years, 20, counties in the local government should be improved and so on and so forth. That means that North Korea's Kim Jong-un is thinking about reforming. So we should keep thinking about that. So in that regard, the international politics, especially US policymakers, should be very much open-minded to the negotiating. And so I don't know who will be the next president of the United States in the next election, but whoever will be, I think the North Korea is changing. They're not really a sort of so-called rogue states for the last 30 years that the US and Western nations painted. Now real threat, sort of real big rogue states already in play. Russia, attacking Ukraine as a nuclear big power that is unprecedented. There's a big, big threat to the United States. And now the Chinese military power is considering sort of attacking Taiwan as another nuclear power. It is real threat to Taiwan in the next years to come, especially when China is in big, big distress in its economy, very low unemployment, very big, unemployment rate in Chinese youth. We don't know how many Chinese youth are unemployed, 40%, some say 70%. And real estate bubbles, Chinese economy is in dire conditions. So that we got to be watchful what China could do to change the course of that kind of economic downfall. So in that regard, U.S. policies toward North Korea and North States should be more open-minded, and what North Korea wanted and now wants to do. So my proposition of a smooth transition to reunification of two Korea is setting up an open space in the middle of two Koreas, turning the DMZ into United Nations peace zone, where Russia and China also joined as an economic partner. And then South Korea, North Korea, US, and Japan have a sort of free economic community, free economic zone. Then North Korea is willing to join those capitalistic kind of economic zone, so that North Korea Kim Jong-un has a way of its own way out to maintain its power and authority. And North and South Korea now taking steps for reunification through such a free economic zone of South and North Korea and the US and Japan, so that we can imagine the sea, the East Sea, could become a Mediterranean Sea in Europe. So Japan, Russia, North and South Korea, and US could share that East Sea as sort of economic boom of that region, and Russia, China can join. So I think it is a very good cycle of unification process. So regardless of whether sudden collapse of Kim Jong-un regime or reforming its power in North Korea by Kim Jong-un, so we need to set up such a UN peace zone in the middle of the Korean Peninsula that will help. So linchpin that will help US, Japan, and South Korea, and North Korea, Russia, and China and even Taiwan. So we're not really afford to having war in North Asia, in Taiwan. It's we cannot imagine the catastrophic nature of such a war. So I very much hope that our idea of a UN peace zone could be spreaded more faster than communism virus, so that it could be a great vaccine, even the mutated communism virus nowadays, so that I hope that we can achieve real truthful peace on the Korean Peninsula. Thank you for the great questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. That is all the questions we have, and thus concluding our second Q&A. Thank you everyone for watching.
All right. Thank you.